The morning of my brother's wedding, my mother handed me a $40 Visa gift card in a Hallmark envelope and said, "We figured you'd find something useful to do with it." Across the room, my sister-in-law's family was presenting my brother with a check for $30,000 toward their down payment fund. My mother watched them do it with her hands clasped and her chin lifted like she was witnessing something holy. I put the envelope in my purse and went to find a bathroom where I could be alone for a minute. I'm the oldest. I've been the oldest my whole life, which sounds like a stupid thing to say. But what I mean is that I've always been the one who is supposed to manage, cope, figure it out. My younger brother Theo got the patience, the praise, the Sunday dinners cooked just the way he liked. I got the expectation that I would be fine without any of that, because I was capable. My mother said that word like it was a compliment. I eventually understood it wasn't. I was 29 that summer. I'd been working as a pediatric occupational therapist for 4 years, renting a one-bedroom apartment in Charlotte, driving a 2017 Honda that made a sound like a disappointed sigh every time I merged onto the highway. I wasn't struggling exactly, but I wasn't comfortable either. My student loans from my master's program were $1,100 a month. My rent was $1,340. I did the math every first of the month like a person who had been trained to expect bad news. My parents were not poor. My father had retired from 30 years in commercial real estate. They had a 4-bedroom house in Raleigh, a lake house they rented out on weekends, and a financial advisor named someone I never met. They took 2 vacations a year. They drove new cars. The $40 Visa card was not a mistake. It was a message, and I'd been receiving that message in various formats my entire adult life. The wedding was beautiful because Theo and his wife, a genuinely warm woman named Jess who I actually liked, had planned everything themselves. I stood in the back during the reception and watched my mother cry happy tears and my father give a toast about what a wonderful son Theo had always been. And I held a glass of champagne I didn't drink and I thought about nothing in particular. On the drive home, I stopped at a gas station outside of Concord. I was tired and I wanted coffee, and I had $11 in my wallet, which felt appropriate. I grabbed a large dark roast from the self-serve station, and then, because I was standing right there, I picked up a scratch ticket from the display near the register, $5. A jackpot crossword. I hadn't bought a lottery ticket since I was 22 and my roommate dared me to on New Year's Eve. I paid for my coffee and my ticket and sat in the parking lot under the fluorescent lights and scratched the thing with a dime I found in my cup holder. I had to scratch it 3 times before I believed what I was seeing. I sat in that parking lot for 45 minutes. I called no one. I Googled the Lottery Commission's website on my phone and read their FAQ page twice. Then I drove home very carefully, like I was carrying something breakable, which I was. The ticket was worth $2.4 million. I want to be honest here about what happened in the weeks after, because I think this part matters and people skip over it in stories like this. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I went to work on Monday morning and put a chart together for a 6-year-old named, it doesn't matter what his name was, a sweet kid who was learning to hold a pencil. And I thought about him the whole drive home. I called the Lottery Commission on my lunch break from the parking garage, voice low, hand cupped around my phone like I was doing something illegal. They walked me through the process. I took the lump sum. After federal and state taxes, I walked away with approximately $1.56 million. I know that sounds like I'm deflating the number, but this is how it works, and I want you to understand I went in clear-eyed. I hired a financial advisor through a CPA firm, someone I found independently, someone who didn't know my family, and I sat in her office for 2 hours with a legal pad and I made a plan. I paid off my student loans in full. I put 6 months of expenses into a high-yield savings account. I invested the majority through an index fund strategy my advisor recommended. I kept my apartment. I kept my job. I kept my car. I told no one. Not a friend, not a coworker, not my brother, who had just married a wonderful woman and was, as far as I could tell, genuinely happy. not my parents. This was the decision that changed everything, and it was also the decision I got the most right. I lived exactly the same life for 8 months. Same apartment, same Honda, same Tuesday nights with takeout pad thai, and whatever was on my laptop. The only difference was that when I opened my banking app, there was a number there that didn't match anything about my visible life. And I found that quietly stabilizing in a way I couldn't fully explain. Then my father had a heart attack. It was moderate, they said. He'd need a stent. He was in the hospital for 4 days and home within a week, and the prognosis was good, but it was enough to pull the whole family into a temporary closeness, the kind that happens around medical emergencies before everyone returns to their usual distances. I drove up to Raleigh. I brought food. I sat with my mother in the hospital waiting room, and she held my hand, and for a few hours I remembered that she was also a person who was scared. When my father came home, something shifted. He started talking about the lake house. They'd been renting it out and it had been profitable. But now he was saying they needed to sell it. Medical bills, a gap in their supplemental insurance, some investment that hadn't gone the way they planned. I listened. I didn't offer anything. A month later, my mother called me on a Wednesday evening. "Your father and I need to talk to you about something," she said. "Can you come this weekend?" I drove up Saturday morning. My brother and Jess were already there when I arrived, which I hadn't expected. We sat in the living room, my parents on the love seat, Theo and Jess on the couch, me in the armchair that had always been slightly too low to the ground, the one that made you feel like a child at the adult table. My father spoke first. They were in a difficult spot financially. The medical bills had wiped through their cushion faster than expected. The lake house had a foundation issue that the inspector flagged, and the repair estimate was $47,000, which made it difficult to sell at a price that made sense. They were looking at their options. Then my mother looked at me directly and said, "We were hoping you might be able to help. Even something small, a loan, just to get through the repair so we can sell the property. We'd pay you back." I looked at her. I looked at my father. I looked at Theo, who was looking at the floor. "I'm a pediatric OT," I said. "You know what I make." "We know it's a lot to ask," my father said. "Is it?" I said. "Because you gave Theo $30,000 as a wedding gift 4 months ago, and you gave me a $40 Visa card." My mother made a sound. "I'm not saying that to be cruel," I said. "I'm saying it so we're all looking at the same picture." Nobody said anything for a moment. Then my father said, "That was different. Jess's family had already committed to a gift and we wanted to match. You wanted to match $30,000 with $40. "Nora," my mother started. She stopped. She had started to call me by my aunt's name, which she did sometimes when she was flustered and caught herself. "Lily," I said quietly, "my own name, a reminder." There was a long pause. Theo finally looked up. He had the expression of someone who had known this conversation was coming but had hoped it would happen a different day, in a different room, without him in it. "We can't help them," he said to me quietly. "We're already stretched with the mortgage." "I know," I said. "I'm not asking you to." I told my parents I would think about it. I drove home. I did think about it. I thought about it for 2 weeks. I thought about the $40 Visa card. I thought about every birthday I'd spent alone in Charlotte, because flying home wasn't in my budget, and my parents had never offered to help with a ticket. I thought about the time I called my mother crying after my first bad performance review at work. I was 24. I didn't know how to handle it. And she told me I'd always been too sensitive, and that maybe I should consider whether the job was really right for me. I thought about the fact that I had $1.56 million sitting in accounts that no one in my family knew about, and that I could write a check for $47,000 and not feel it, and that I probably wasn't going to do that. Not because I was heartless, because the money was not the point. The point was that I had been asking my parents for something my whole life that had nothing to do with money, and this moment, them calling me with their hands out, was the clearest version of that dynamic I had ever seen. I called my mother back on a Sunday afternoon. I can't loan you the money, I said. I don't have that kind of liquidity. But I want to help you think through your options. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I see. I can help you find a contractor for a second estimate on the foundation, I said. And I can help you look at what a realistic sale price would be with the repair disclosed. Sometimes full disclosure sells faster than you'd think. That's very practical, she said, in a tone that made it clear she did not mean it as a compliment. I know, I said. I did help them. I spent 3 weekends researching foundation repair contractors in their area. I found 2 who came in significantly under the first estimate. The repair ended up being $31,000, not $47,000. I connected them with a real estate attorney I found through my own financial advisor's network who helped them structure the disclosure properly. They sold the lake house in 6 weeks for a number that, after the repair, left him with a modest but real profit. My mother called me after the closing. The check cleared, she said. Good, I said. I suppose you think we should say thank you. I paused. I don't think you should do anything you don't want to do. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Thank you, Lily. It was the most straightforward thing she had said to me in years, and I didn't know what to do with it, so I just said, You're welcome. And we talked about something else. Summer passed, then fall. I turned 30 in November and took myself to dinner at a restaurant I'd been wanting to try for 2 years. I sat at the bar alone, which I used to find embarrassing and now found clarifying. I ordered the tasting menu and a glass of Burgundy, and I thought about where I was and where I thought I'd be at 30, and they were different places. But the place I actually was felt more like mine than the imagined one ever had. I had started to think about next steps. My lease was up in March. I'd been looking at properties, not to buy immediately but to understand the market, the way my financial advisor had suggested. I was also thinking about my career. Not leaving OT, but maybe a different setting. I'd been talking to a colleague about a practice she was starting, something outpatient and pediatric focused, and whether I'd want to come in as a part owner. It was a version of my life I'd been building quietly without announcing it, which felt right. My sister-in-law called me in January. Jess. She was warm on the phone in a way that made me trust her, which she had always been. She said she wanted me to know something before I heard it another way. My mother had mentioned, at a family dinner I hadn't been at, that she'd heard from someone, a friend of a friend who had worked at the gas station in Concord, a woman who vaguely remembered a transaction, that I might have won something, a scratch ticket, a while back. I let the silence sit for a moment. Your mom brought it up almost like it was funny, Jess said carefully. I don't think she really believes it. But your brother got quiet, and I thought you should know the conversation happened. Thank you, I said. Really. I'm not going to say anything, she said. It's not my business. I know, I said. That's why I'm glad you called. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table with my hands flat on the surface and thought clearly for about 10 minutes. Then I called my financial advisor and told her we needed to meet. 3 days later, I sat across from her in her office downtown and I told her what had happened. Not just the lottery, all of it. The $40 gift card, the lake house, the request for money, the phone call from Jess. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, What do you want? I said, I want to know that I'm protected, and then I want to move forward. She walked me through it. My accounts were already structured in a way that provided privacy. The winnings had been processed through an LLC my attorney had set up at her recommendation, which was standard practice for lottery winners who wanted to limit exposure. My name wasn't publicly attached to the win. The woman at the gas station would have seen the transaction, the scratch ticket, the excitement. But she wouldn't have seen the amount, because I hadn't known the amount when I was in that parking lot. I'd only verified the claim number on my phone before leaving. So there's no paper trail that leads publicly to you, my advisor said. Right, I said. Then the question is what you tell your family. I've thought about that for a long time. Longer than the meeting. I thought about it that night and the next morning and on the drive to work. I thought about what my mother had said. I suppose you think we should say thank you. And I thought about my father's voice in the hospital waiting room, thin and tired in a way I'd never heard before. I thought about Theo looking at the floor during that living room conversation, and whether that meant he knew something, or was ashamed of something, or was just being Theo, who had always been better at disappearing than at showing up. I decided on the truth. Not all of it, not yet, but enough. I asked my parents to come to Charlotte. That was the first signal. I never asked them to come to me. I always went to them. My father said they'd come the following Saturday. I made coffee. I cleaned my apartment, not obsessively but enough. I sat them down at my kitchen table, which was small but sturdy, and I told them that I needed to say something that had been a long time coming. I told them I had won a lottery ticket the night of Theo's wedding. I told them the amount. I watched my mother's face go through 6 different expressions in about 4 seconds. My father went very still. I've had the money for a year, I said. I didn't tell you because I needed time to understand it myself, and because, honestly, I needed to see what would happen if I had it and no one knew. What do you mean, what would happen? My mother said. I mean with us, I said. I needed to see how things were when there was no money on the table. My mother looked at the window. My father looked at his coffee cup. You lent us the contractor's name, my father said slowly. You helped us with the lake house. Yes. But you had the money to just. Yes. He nodded once, very slowly, like he was doing a calculation that kept coming out to a number he didn't expect. I'm not telling you this so you can ask me for anything, I said. I'm telling you because I don't want to build something real from a false starting point. I'm about to make some significant decisions about my life, where I live, what I do, and I want to do that honestly, with you knowing who I actually am now. My mother had been quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was careful. I know we haven't always treated you the same as your brother, she said. I know the gift at the wedding it wasn't right. We thought because you were independent you didn't need. She stopped. Started again. That was our reasoning. I'm not saying it was good reasoning. It wasn't, I said. No, she said, it wasn't. We sat in my small kitchen for another hour. No one cried, which surprised me. My father asked a few practical questions about how the LLC worked, which was him being my father, looking for something concrete to engage with when the emotional territory got unnavigable. My mother asked if I was happy. I told her I was getting there. After they left, I stood at my kitchen window and watched their car pull out of the parking lot. The air outside was cold and gray, and the bare trees on the street looked like things that had decided to stop performing and just be what they were. I thought about the woman at the gas station and what she had or hadn't seen. I thought about the $40 Visa card, still somewhere in my purse from 8 months ago because I never throw anything away. I thought about the kid I'd worked with that week. A 7-year-old learning to manage transitions, learning that the end of one thing wasn't the same as the loss of everything. And I thought about how much of my job was teaching people to believe that. My brother called that night. My parents had called him apparently immediately after leaving my apartment. Why didn't you tell me? He said. He didn't sound angry. He sounded like someone who had just understood something about a story they thought they already knew. Because I didn't know what I was doing yet, I said. I needed to figure it out alone first. He was quiet for a minute. The $40 card, he said. Yeah. I knew that was wrong, he said. I didn't say anything. I know you didn't. I should have. Yes, I said, you should have. He asked if we could have dinner. I said yes. We picked a date 2 weeks out. The 4 of us, him and Jess and me and whoever I decided to bring, which at this point was probably just myself, and that was fine. I bought the property in February. Not a house, a condo. 2 bedrooms, top floor of a converted building in Noda, the arts district in Charlotte. High ceilings. A small balcony that faced east. I paid cash, which made the closing feel both anticlimactic and entirely right. I signed the partner agreement with my colleague's practice in March. We're outpatient pediatric, 4 days a week, taking insurance and private pay both. We have 6 months of runway and a wait list that's already 6 weeks long. I work with a team now, which is different from working alone, and sometimes harder, but I'm learning to be someone who asks for help in the right proportions. My parents came to see the condo in April. My mother walked through every room with her hands in her cardigan pockets. She stood at the east-facing window in the second bedroom and looked out at the skyline and said, "This is yours." "Yes," I said. "You did this." "With a scratch ticket and a lot of very careful decisions after," I said. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. It was the most surprised I'd ever heard her. My father stood in the living room and looked at the bookshelves I'd built along the far wall, floor to ceiling, the kind I'd always wanted. And he said, "You know, I always thought you'd end up somewhere like this. I just thought it would take longer." "It took exactly as long as it needed to," I said. He nodded. He ran one hand along the spine of a book, not reading the title, just touching it. Something about the gesture broke a small thing loose in my chest that had been lodged there for a very long time. I let it go. I don't carry the $40 Visa card anymore. I finally took it out of my purse sometime in March, right before the closing on the condo. I stood over the kitchen trash can and held it for a second, the envelope still crisp, the hallmark pattern on the front slightly faded, and then I put it down on the counter. I still have it. I'm not sure why. It's in the junk drawer in my new kitchen, under a takeout menu and some rubber bands. I'm not sentimental about it exactly. I think I keep it because it was the last night I was that version of myself. Standing in a gas station parking lot in Concord, $11 in my wallet, scratching a ticket under fluorescent lights. And even the hardest true things are worth remembering clearly. My superpower was never the money was just a tool, the way most things are tools if you hold them right. My superpower was the 8 months I spent knowing something no one else knew and choosing not to use it the way they would have expected me to, and finding out, slowly, in the silence of my ordinary Tuesday nights, that I had always been the kind of person who could do that. I had just never been given the conditions to find out. Now I know, and knowing is the thing that doesn't go away. I kept the $40 Visa card. It's in my junk drawer right now, under a takeout menu I'll never use, and I'm not entirely sure why I haven't thrown it away. I think it's because that card represents the last moment before everything shifted. Not the lottery, not the money, but the moment I finally stopped waiting for my family to see me clearly and decided to see myself instead. What I learned isn't something I could have been told. I had to live it in the quiet, in 8 months of Tuesday nights alone in my apartment, knowing something nobody else knew and choosing not to use it as a weapon. That choice, to hold still, to watch, to understand what I was actually dealing with, that was the thing that mattered. Not the winning number on the ticket. People hear stories like mine and they think the turning point is the luck. It isn't. Luck handed me a tool. What I did with it came from somewhere else entirely, from years of being the one who figured things out without being asked how she was doing, from learning to be self-sufficient because no one offered to make it easier, from developing a kind of inner steadiness that doesn't come from comfort. It comes from its opposite. I'm not glad my parents treated me the way they did. I don't think difficulty is a gift. But I do think that when you're consistently underestimated, you either collapse into it or you quietly build something they can't see. I built something they can't see. And the 8 months I spent knowing my own worth before anyone else did, that was the foundation everything else was built on. Theo said he should have spoken up about the gift card. He was right. One of the things I've had to sit with is that staying silent in the face of something wrong, even out of discomfort, has a cost. It just gets charged to someone else's account. That's not malice, but it's not innocence either. The people who don't do the harm but don't interrupt it are part of the equation. I think he understands that now. We're still figuring out what our relationship looks like when it's honest, which is slower and harder than I expected, but more real. My mother asking if I was happy. That question surprised me. It still does, a little, when I think about it. Not because it was the wrong question, but because it might have been the first time she asked it without already having the answer she preferred. That's a small thing. It's also not small at all. I think about the kid I was working with the week everything came out. The 7-year-old learning to manage transitions. His whole challenge was believing that the end of something familiar wasn't the end of everything. I taught that lesson 5 days a week without always knowing I was also teaching it to myself. What carries you isn't certainty, it isn't luck, and it isn't the absence of people who undervalue you. It's the willingness to do the right thing even when no one's watching. To be honest when dishonesty would be easier, to think clearly when emotion wants to take the wheel, and to keep going through the specific, unremarkable difficulty of days when nothing confirms that you're on the right track. That's it. That's the whole thing. I know that now because I lived through the version where I didn't have proof yet, and on the other side of it, the condo is mine, the practice is real, and I'm someone I would have wanted to become. That turns out to be enough.